Part of what makes dealing with risk and a policy perspective so difficult is that people misperceive risk, and they also are highly susceptible to the framing of that risk. What do I mean by the framing of the risk? Well, it's the language we use to talk about the risk and how risky we make it sound, or how safe we make it sound. So let me give you an example of that. Suppose that you had been diagnosed with lung cancer, and you had two possible options in treatment, either surgery or radiation therapy. If you follow surgery, out of 100 having the surgery, 90 live through the post-operative period, 68 are alive at the end of the first year, and only 34 are alive at the end of 5 years. If you follow radiation therapy, of those 100 people having the radiation therapy, all survive the treatment. 77 are alive at the end of year 1, and 22 are alive at the end of 5 years. When framed this way, 18% of people decide to choose the radiation therapy. Alternatively, consider exactly the same problem framed this way. Suppose if you pursue the surgery, of 100 people having the surgery, 10 die during surgery or the post-operative period, 32 die by the end of the first year, and 66 die by the end of 5 years. Alternatively, if you follow radiation therapy, of 100 having the radiation therapy, none die during the treatment, 23 die by the end of 1 year, and 78 die by the end of 5 years. When we frame it this way, in terms of mortality, or in terms of the number who die, now 44% want the radiation therapy, where only 18% wanted it before. In other words, more are willing to take the riskier option when it's framed in terms of deaths than when it's framed in terms of lives saved. The framing affects how we perceive the risk and how we trade this off. And it's not just the layperson who's influenced by this. This same experiment was run on physicians or people who had really significant statistical sophistication. Both of those groups all ended up falling prey to the same sort of bias of changing their decision depending on how that question was framed. So why does framing matter in politics? We end up being generally more willing to take risks when they are framed as losses than when framed as potential gains. And what does that mean? Well, it means the language we use is going to be shaped by the outcome we want. Those who really want to push people away from a particular choice are going to frame it in terms of possible gains, and those who want to draw people to a particular risk will frame it in terms of potential losses. We also fall prey to misperceptions. Very many people, for example, push back and won't even attempt to skydive, right? Skydiving sounds like something really risky, and because it's risky, you don't want to go near it. On the other hand, a lot of people end up going canoeing, and it seems something sort of mundane and sort of familiar. Which one of these ends up being more risky for you? Well, in terms of deaths, skydiving and canoeing actually are just about as risky. About 1 in 100,000 who participate in the sport will die. So why in the world don't you skydive? Well, it's because we sort of misperceive how risky skydiving is relative to canoeing. Like I said, skydiving is something that is really sort of unfamiliar. And when we're not familiar with something, we inflate the risks and the probability of those risks that are associated with it. But it's not just familiarity. It's also the graphic image in our minds of falling out of a plane and hitting the ground. This is something that we have a hard time separating ourselves from, and when we associate it with that sort of graphic image, it then multiplies that risk in our mind. So you might be wondering, how is this relevant to foods, and in particular to GMOs? Well, we commit these same sorts of errors whenever we start talking about food safety or GMOs or any sort of technology within our food. How does this manifest itself? Well, for example, if we offer people ice cream and we have a list of ingredients that are very familiar in them, like butterfat and milk and sugar, people feel really good about that food, and they will choose that food more often than if we take that same exact ice cream and convert the names of those ingredients into something that sounds sort of scientific and full of Latin. The more unfamiliar it sounds, the more someone becomes a little bit afraid of the ingredients that are in it, even if it's something that is actually extremely safe and familiar.